XCN gives me the vibe of XLM, but in a much smaller scale, arguably I would say, even though nothing I say is financial advice. And the reason why is not just because I still have the thought of 25 cents on my mind when it comes to XCN, but also on top of that, if we take a look at XLM, for a very long time, everyone thought that, hey, you know what? The alternative beyond XRP, if someone doesn't really want to believe in it, because maybe the market cap's too massive or for whatever reason, in some cases people do look at XLM. But then at the same time, there hasn't really been much talk about, hey, what is beyond XLM, right? This is why I'm taking a look at something like XCN, which is arguably, I think, that among some of its competitors could arguably be viewed as XLM in a much smaller scale, meaning that it's a project that is focused on pretty much the same markets as Stellar, but then at the same time, with a lower market cap and not much recognizability, but then still has the same vibe, if that makes sense. Now, I think XCN falls in that category, much like something, for instance, ZBCN, Swiftcoin, XPR, and XDC. But then again, I think XCN just gives me that XLM type of vibe, but in a much smaller scale. Because let's take a look at Onyx. What is it focused on? Global trade and finance, and as well as the payments market. Not to mention, they're even intending to launch the mainnet of a layer 1 blockchain for the world of finance called Goliath in Q1 of 2026. So that kind of a little bit reminds me of the Stellar blockchain in a sense, even though of course it's a bit different, right? I mean, the Stellar blockchain, it's already very popular, it's already doing very well. So it's not really comparable in a head-to-head kind of comparison, but then just the vibe of it. And keep in mind, when it comes to the payments market, currently valued at over $2 trillion, the global trade and finance market predicted to reach up to $5 trillion in value by 2028, according to Mordor Intelligence. So it's a pretty massive, market to be focused on, right? If we take a look at payments, for instance, or global trade and finance. But then for the longest time, it was just either XRP or XLM or vice versa. Now that some of these other projects have been having that recognition a little bit, I feel like XCN is really getting somewhat attention a little bit in a grand scheme of things because the market cap is in the hundreds of millions. Sure, it hasn't reached around like a $13 billion market cap, which XLM is currently, give or take. But then it just gives me that vibe in a much smaller scale. If we take a look at Onyx as well, they're working on, I think, pretty good things, right? Beyond Goliath, for instance, I take a look at the strides they're making when it comes to the Onyx wallet, which granted is really nothing that groundbreaking, but I still like it nonetheless. And if we take a look at it, Onyx isn't necessarily trying to reinvent the wheel in a sense where it's focused on payments, focused on global trade and finance, but isn't really doing anything that is too, I think, kind of that different, right? And I kind of view, arguably, Stellar in that way a little bit as well. Like, of course, we take a look at Ripple, and then sometimes people like to say, oh, Stellar is kind of the backup, kind of like the backup quarterback. But then I think that when it comes to that, again, is Stellar really doing anything that revolutionary in the grand scheme of things? I think it's kind of similar to Onyx, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that Onyx has to really be doing anything that groundbreaking, but then just because it's focused on payments, it's focused on global trade and finance, where it doesn't really have that many competitors, I think that right there is actually hypothetically a good thing when it comes to the case of Onyx, and I kind of do see that as well when it comes to Stellar. And I think a major reason why something like XLM for quite a while didn't really have anything to kind of compare to in the grand scheme of things is because if we take a look at the Ripple and SEC kind of situation that went on for quite a while, I think because of those times, maybe a lot of developers, I'm assuming, were a little bit apprehensive to join into a space where there's that kind of reputation. So I think maybe some of the developers probably opted for blockchain gaming, maybe heavily focused on AI or DeFi, right? Decentralized finance, whatever the case may be. Which is why I think now there's actually not that many competitors. So, sure, some people may be thinking that, okay, how can you say that XCN gives the vibes a little bit of XLM? Well, again, just take a look at the kind of space that it's in. XCN arguably has 4 direct competitors if you remove XLM and XRP from the equation, so to speak. That's not that many, and if there's not that many projects that are kind of an alternative to XLM that are that popular, I would arguably say that again, this kind of gives me that vibe. It's a different case if there's 20 or 30 different projects, then it's kind of a little bit difficult to kind of directly compare XCN to XLM, even though it's kind of focused on the same thing, give or take, when it comes to Onyx compared to Stellar, because of course maybe the perceived reputation is too different. But this one doesn't really have such a drastic kind of distance from Stellar because there's not that many competitors. This is why I'm such a fan when it comes to XCN. But ultimately speaking, I'm staying patient because, for instance, if maybe XCN went to the price of 25 cents, considering current circulating supply, market cap at that point would be around $8.7 billion. It's running a 19x from here. Again, keep in mind, the current market cap of XLM is currently around $13 billion. You know, if that does run 19x from here, could you imagine the size of that market cap? You know what I mean? Like, even a 10x, let's say, right? I'm not even saying a 19x. Let's just say a 10x. And then XLM goes to a market cap of around 130 billion. That's already kind of like very impressive in the grand scheme of things. But then the thing is, XCN to do 19x, give or take, market cap at that point would be around 8.7 billion. Like, it doesn't need anything that groundbreaking, if that makes sense, to reach kind of that maybe hypothetical upside if it were to maybe even happen. So, even though I still believe in XLM, I must say that I'm also a fan of Onyx because XCN, just naturally speaking, because the market cap is lower, hypothetical upside, in terms of percentage price increase, may kind of be not such a hard time to do, arguably, I would say, when it comes to XLM in terms of doing like a 10x, 15x, whatever, in the next 6 months, let's say, or even just for the rest of this cycle. So this is why I'm still kind of staying patient when it comes to XCN. I haven't given up, and I get it. It's kind of easy because, of course, XCN did pretty good, and then it had a pump, and then it did have a pullback, and then now it's kind of like not really doing much, even though some altcoins are having a slight recovery a little bit. Not that much, though, but still, you know, it's kind of a long ways away from where it was not too long ago. And I get it. It's kind of easy to just be like, oh, yeah, I'm out. But then I don't want to do that because I waited this long. I've been through the kind of the roller coaster when it comes to XCN, from that moment where no one really believed in it, had a pump, and then had a pullback. I'm not just going to give up like that. But then this is just my mindset. But I'm still staying patient. Now, there's over 600 million crypto owners currently, allegedly, and that's supposedly more than ever before in history. Whereas in the peak of the 2021 bull run, there was around 300 million crypto owners. When I take a look at something like that, it actually really excites me because we have over 600 million crypto owners currently. And I don't think we've even seen a fully fledged type of altcoin season yet, maybe during this cycle, like what we saw back in 2021. And there's already that many crypto owners. So what would happen if we do ever see a fully fledged type of altcoin season? What do we see in terms of crypto owners if we see, let's say, Bitcoin at 150 grand, 200, 250, whatever the case may be, maybe 300, or Ethereum at 10 grand? This is why I'm still staying patient. And I don't think that XCN, or should I say Onyx, is focused on a market that is heavily saturated because, again, now there seems to be kind of this demand a little bit for projects that are beyond XRP and XLM, or should I say Stellar and Ripple, but then, of course, with a way lower market cap than XRP and XLM. And there's actually not that many famous ones, just like I mentioned earlier on the video. I like XCN's positioning, and I'm staying patient, and that's about it. I'm dollar cost averaging, holding, and just waiting. But ultimately speaking, again, this kind of gives me the vibe a little bit of a Stellar when it comes to Onyx. But this is just my mindset. And feel free to subscribe if you enjoyed this video. I'd greatly appreciate it. It's been Lee the Captain, and I'll catch y'all on the next one. I'm out. Peace. Bye.